I used to think people who talked to their weed were just high idiots. Then a joint started talking back, and I realized they weren't crazy. They were just better at listening than the rest of us. Here's what nobody wants to say out loud. That voice you hear when you're high, it's not the weed talking. It's the part of you that's been trying to get your attention for years, and you've been too busy, too distracted, or too scared to listen. So here's the question that changed everything for me. If that voice has been there all along, if it knows things about your life that you don't even know you know, then what else have you been missing? What conversations have you been too sober to hear? By the end of this story, you're going to understand something that will change how you see every decision you make, every relationship you have, and every moment when you're not sure what to do next. You're going to realize that the most important conversation you'll ever have isn't with anyone else. It's with yourself. But first, let me tell you about the night I sat down with a joint and accidentally discovered the smartest person I'd ever met. Me. When the smoke clears, the voice appears. So there I was, staring at this joint like it held the secrets of the universe, which, honestly, it kinda did. The first hit always catches you off guard. Not the coughing, that's amateur hour. I'm talking about that moment when your thoughts start shifting. Like someone just changed the radio frequency in your brain, and suddenly you're picking up stations you never knew existed. Here's what nobody tells you about weed and your mind. It doesn't give you new thoughts. It just makes the quiet ones loud enough to finally hear. I'm sitting there maybe 10 minutes in, and I notice something weird. My internal monologue, that constant chatter running in the background of your mind, it's not quite mine anymore. The tone is different. The perspective has shifted. It's like having a conversation, except I'm not sure who's talking. Think about it. How do you know which thoughts are actually yours? Right now, as you're listening to this, there's probably a voice in your head commenting on what I'm saying. Maybe it's agreeing, maybe it's skeptical. But here's the mind bender. Is that voice really you, or is it just another program running in the background? The weeds seem to create some kind of space. Like I could suddenly watch my thoughts instead of just thinking them. It's like being able to step back and see yourself from the outside. But this felt way more personal than that sounds. It felt like meeting a roommate I'd been living with for years, but had never actually seen. The voice wasn't hostile or alien. It was curious, patient, almost wise. It asked questions I'd been avoiding. It pointed out patterns I'd been blind to. It had opinions about my life that were definitely mine, but somehow clearer than any perspective I'd had while sober. And here's where it gets really interesting. Scientists are now proving what wise people have known forever. Your brain isn't just one voice. It's more like a group chat with different parts of your mind all talking at once. Cannabis doesn't make you crazy. It just lets you hear the conversation that's been happening all along. Think of your normal everyday mind like a strict teacher who only lets one student speak at a time. When you smoke weed, that teacher steps out of the room for a bit. Suddenly, all the other students, different parts of your brain, start sharing their thoughts. And some of them have been waiting a really long time to speak up. So when I felt like I was talking to the joint, I wasn't losing my mind. I was finally finding parts of it I'd been too distracted to notice. The question that started nagging me, the one that would change everything, was simple but profound. If this voice has been there all along, what else have I been missing? What conversations have I been too sober to hear? The wisdom of altered states. That's when the conversation took a turn I wasn't ready for. You know how sometimes a friend calls you out on something you've been lying to yourself about? That moment when they see right through your excuses and just nail you with the truth? That's exactly what happened next. You're scared of your own potential, aren't you? I actually laughed out loud. Like, who says stuff like that? But then the laughter stopped. Because deep down, I knew this voice was right. And it wasn't done with me yet. Remember when you were 8 and wanted to be an artist? What happened to that kid? Boom. Direct hit. I hadn't thought about that dream in years. I'd buried it under being practical and paying bills and all the grown-up reasons we use to kill the parts of ourselves that actually matter. But this voice, it remembered everything. It had been keeping track of every dream I'd abandoned, every compromise I'd made, every time I'd chosen safe over authentic. Here's what nobody tells you about getting high. It doesn't just change how you think. It changes what you're brave enough to think about. That night, I had to face some uncomfortable truths. The voice wasn't mean about it, but it wasn't letting me off the hook either. It was like having the most honest therapist in the world, except this therapist knew every secret I'd ever kept from myself. You know your relationship is over, right? Has been for months. You hate your job because it's slowly killing who you really are. You pretend you don't have time to write, but you watch Netflix for 3 hours every night. Each statement hit like a perfectly aimed arrow. Not cruel, just accurate. Painfully, undeniably accurate. Think about the last time someone asked you, "How are you really doing?" Not the nice answer you give to people at work, but the real answer. Most of us don't even ask ourselves that question honestly. We're too busy, too distracted, too scared of what we might find out. But when your mind gets quiet enough, when all the everyday noise stops, that's when the real stuff comes up. The stuff you've been pushing down, ignoring, pretending isn't there. It's like your inner truth has been sitting in the corner of a noisy restaurant, trying to get your attention for years. And suddenly, everyone else stops talking, and you can finally hear what it's been trying to tell you. The scary part? This voice knew me better than I knew myself. It remembered things I'd forgotten, saw patterns I couldn't see, connected dots I'd never connected. It was like talking to a version of myself that had been watching while I was just going through the motions of life. You're not depressed, it told me during a particularly heavy moment. You're just living someone else's life. That hit different. Because depression feels like something wrong with you. But living someone else's life, that's a choice you can change. Here's the thing that changed everything for me. We spend so much time trying to figure out who we should be that we forget to ask who we really are. We're so busy being who our parents want, who our job needs, who everyone expects, that we lose touch with our own gut feelings. But those gut feelings are always there. It's that feeling when something's not right. It's that excitement when you find something you love. It's that voice that whispers, "This isn't you," when you're pretending to be someone you're not. The weed didn't give me magic powers. It just cleared away enough mental noise that I could finally hear what my gut had been trying to tell me all along. And here's what really blew my mind. Every time in my life when I'd made a decision I was proud of, every time I'd chosen courage over comfort, every breakthrough moment, they all happened when I listened to this same inner voice. I just never realized it was there. That 8-year-old who wanted to be an artist, still there, still waiting, still believing it was possible. The part of me that knew my relationship was over, it had been trying to tell me for months. I just kept turning up the volume on everything else to drown it out. The voice that was tired of my dead-end job, it had been leaving clues everywhere. The Sunday night anxiety, the way I felt physically sick walking into the office, the dreams about doing something that actually mattered. I'd been living with the world's best life coach inside my head, and I'd been too distracted to notice. But once you hear it, once you really listen to what your deepest self has been trying to tell you, you can't unhear it. The truth doesn't go away just because the high wears off. And that's when I realized If this voice had been there all along, if it knew all these things about me even when I was sober, then maybe the problem wasn't that I needed to get high to hear it. Maybe the problem was that I'd forgotten how to listen. Conversations with cannabis. Remember that voice I mentioned? The one that didn't quite sound like me anymore? Well, it started getting chatty. And I mean really chatty. At first, I thought I was just high and overthinking things. But then something happened that changed everything. The voice started asking me questions I'd never asked myself. Not random stoner thoughts like, what if colors had feelings? No, these were the kind of questions that cut straight to the bone. Why do you always say yes when you want to say no? I'm sitting there, joint halfway to my lips, and this thought just appears, clear as day, like someone else dropped it into my head. And the weird part? I knew exactly what it meant. Every time I'd agreed to work late when I wanted to go home. Every party I'd gone to when I wanted to stay in. Every relationship I'd stayed in longer than I should have. The voice wasn't judging me. It was just curious, like a friend who finally felt safe enough to tell you the truth. Here's what I learned that night. Your mind is constantly having conversations with itself. Most of the time, though, one voice drowns out all the others. It's usually the voice of anxiety, or the voice of what other people expect from you, or the voice that's terrified of making mistakes. But weed turns down that loud, bossy voice. And suddenly, you can hear all the other parts of yourself that have been trying to get your attention. Think about the last time you had a really important decision to make. How many different opinions did you have about it? Part of you probably wanted to play it safe. Another part wanted to take the risk. Maybe there was a voice saying, "What will people think?" and another one whispering, "What do you actually want?" Those aren't just random thoughts fighting for space. They're different parts of who you are, each with their own smarts, each trying to help you figure out life. The problem is, we're so used to the loud noise that we can't hear the important stuff. The joint became like a mediator in a meeting I didn't even know I was having. You know you're not happy at your job, right? There it was again. Simple, direct, undeniably true. I'd been telling everyone, including myself, that work was fine, just a rough patch. But this inner voice wasn't buying it. It had been watching. It had been keeping track. And now, with the everyday mental chatter turned down, it finally had a chance to speak up. This wasn't some mystical experience with a talking plant. This was me, finally listening to me. All of me. Here's something cool. Your brain is always having arguments with itself. It's like having a bunch of friends who all think they know what's best for you. Usually, the loudest friend wins, but that doesn't mean they're the smartest one. When you smoke weed, those arguing voices get more equal time. The quieter ones get louder. The pushy ones get quieter. And for maybe the first time in years, you get to hear what all parts of yourself have been trying to tell you. The conversation that night lasted hours. We talked about my relationships, my fears, my dreams I'd been too scared to chase. And by we, I mean all the different parts of me that normally never get a word in edgewise. Here's the thing that'll blow your mind. Every major decision you've ever made, every breakthrough you've ever had, every moment of clarity in your life, they all happened when you finally heard from these quieter voices. You know that gut feeling that tells you someone's lying before your logical brain catches up? That's one of them talking. That sudden knowing that you need to end a relationship or quit a job or move to a different city. That's another one. The joint didn't give me new insights. It just created the space for insights I already had to finally break through the noise. And once you realize that conversation is always happening, once you know those voices are always there, you start to wonder, what else have they been trying to tell you? What would happen if you listened more often, even when you're sober? Integration, bringing the inside out. So there I was the next morning, completely sober, staring at my coffee and wondering if any of that actually happened. You know that feeling when you wake up from a really intense dream? For a few seconds, it feels more real than reality. Then your logical brain kicks in and you start questioning everything. Did I really have that conversation with myself? Or was I just high? But here's the thing. The voice didn't disappear with the high. It was quieter now, sure, like someone had turned down the volume, but it was still there, still watching, still commenting on my choices. And honestly, that scared me more than anything that happened while I was stoned. Because now I had to figure out what to do with all this stuff I couldn't unknow. Remember that friend I mentioned? The one who calls you out when you're lying to yourself? Well, imagine that friend moved in with you, permanently, and they have opinions about everything you do. Really? You're going to scroll Instagram instead of working on that project? Why did you just agree to plans you don't want to make? You know she's not actually listening to you, right? It was like having a running commentary on my life, but from the part of me that actually gave a damn about who I was becoming. The weird part, I started looking forward to it. Think about the last time you had a talk that changed how you see yourself. Maybe it was with someone who really gets you, or even just someone who said exactly what you needed to hear. How long did that good feeling last? A few days? A week? But this was different. This wasn't advice from outside. This was me talking to me. And I couldn't just ignore it or forget it when things got uncomfortable. So I started experimenting. Could I access this voice without getting high? Could I have these honest conversations with myself when I was completely sober? Turns out I could, but I had to get really quiet to hear it. I'm talking really, really quiet. Phone in another room quiet. No music, no TV, nothing to distract you. Just me sitting with my thoughts, waiting for all the noise to stop so I could hear what was underneath. At first it felt ridiculous, like I was trying to have a conversation with myself in an empty room. But then I remembered that's exactly what I had been doing my whole life. I'd just never been quiet enough to realize it. The breakthrough came about a week later. I was stressed about a decision at work, going in circles, overthinking everything. So I did something I'd never done before. I sat down, got quiet, and asked myself, what do you think I should do? And I waited. Not for the anxious voice that usually takes over, not for the voice of what other people might think. I waited for that deeper voice, the one that had been so clear when I was high. And it answered. You already know what you want to do. You're just scared to do it. Boom. There it was. Simple, direct, true. The same voice that had called me out about my job, my relationship, my abandoned dreams. But now I was accessing it without any chemical help. Here's what I learned. That voice isn't the weed talking. It's not some magic plant talking to you. It's the part of you that's been watching and learning while you've been too busy to notice. It's the part that noticed your heart rate spike every time your boss sent an email. The part that felt your energy drain every time you hung out with certain people. The part that remembered what you actually cared about before you started caring about what everyone else thought you should care about. We all have this voice. We just spend so much time listening to everything else that we forget it's there. Your gut instinct when you meet someone new, that's it talking. That feeling when you walk into a room and know something's off, that's it too. That sudden certainty about what you need to do next, even when it doesn't make logical sense, same voice. The problem is, we've been taught to ignore it. We're told to think with our heads, be practical, be realistic. We're told that feelings aren't facts and gut feelings can't be trusted. So we learn to ignore that inner wisdom and listen to charts and lists and what other people think instead. But what if we've got it backwards? What if that inner voice is actually the most reliable thing we have? I started testing this theory. Every time I had a decision to make, I'd take a minute to get quiet and ask that voice what it thought. Not the worried voice, not the people-pleasing voice, not the scared voice, the deep one. The one that seemed to know things I didn't consciously know. And you know what? It was right.
like scary right. About people, about chances I should take, about which choices would lead where. It was like having directions for life, except these directions could see what was coming next. The more I listened, the stronger it got. The more I trusted it, the clearer it became. And slowly, I started making different choices. Better choices. Choices that actually felt like mine. I ended that relationship that had been over for months. I started writing again for the first time in years. I had conversations I'd been avoiding. I stopped saying yes to things I didn't want to do. And here's the crazy part. None of it was as scary as I thought it would be, because I wasn't making these changes alone. I was making them with the part of myself that had been trying to guide me all along. The voice that started as a conversation with a joint had become a conversation with the truest part of myself. And once you learn how to have that conversation sober, once you realize you don't need anything outside yourself to access your own wisdom, everything changes. Because the real question isn't whether weed can help you hear your inner voice. The real question is, now that you know it's there, what are you going to do about it?
The sober conversation. 6 months later, I'm sitting in the same spot where this whole thing started. No joint this time, just me and my thoughts. And you know what? The conversation is still happening. It's different now, though. Clearer, more focused. Like the difference between talking to someone through a bad phone connection and sitting across from them at your kitchen table. Here's what I figured out. Getting high didn't teach me how to think differently. It taught me how to listen differently. And once you learn to really listen to yourself, you can't go back to pretending you don't hear what you hear. That voice I thought was the weed talking, it never left. It just became part of who I am instead of feeling like some separate thing watching my life. Now it's just me. The real me. The me that was always there but got buried under years of trying to be who everyone else wanted me to be. Remember that 8-year-old who wanted to be an artist? I'm writing again. Every morning before the world wakes up and starts demanding things from me. It's not perfect. It's not going to make me rich, but it's mine. And that voice, my voice, loves it. That job that was slowly killing my soul, I quit. Scared the hell out of me, but I did it. And you know what the voice said when I walked out of that office for the last time? Finally. That relationship that was over, but I was too scared to admit it? We had the conversation. It hurt, but it was honest. And now we're both free to find what we actually want instead of pretending we already had it. But here's the thing that really changed everything. I'm not the only one having these conversations. Think about your closest friends, the ones you can really talk to. When you're with them, do you ever notice how different you sound? How you say things you wouldn't say to anyone else? How you feel more like yourself? That's because they create the space for your real voice to come out. Just like that joint created space for mine. But what if you could create that space for yourself? What if you could be your own best friend, your own trusted advisor, your own safe place to tell the truth? I started paying attention to the people around me. Really paying attention. And I noticed something incredible. The people who seemed most alive, most confident, most genuinely happy, they all had one thing in common. They listened to themselves. Not the worried voice, not the people-pleasing voice, not the voice that's terrified of making mistakes. They listened to the deep voice. The one that knows things without knowing how it knows them. My friend Sarah always seems to know exactly what to say in tough situations. One day, I asked her how she does it. She said, I just get quiet for a second and ask myself what feels true. Then I say that. My neighbor Mike left his corporate job to start a food truck. Everyone thought he was crazy, but he told me, I kept having this feeling that I was supposed to be feeding people, making them happy. I ignored it for years. Finally, I decided to listen. These aren't special people with magical powers.
They're just regular people who learned to trust the voice inside them that the rest of us spent most of our time drowning out. And here's what really blew my mind. That voice isn't just about big life choices. It's always trying to help you with everything. Who to trust, what to eat, when to rest, how to handle fights, what chances to take, which people make you tired and which ones make you feel good. It's like having your own personal life coach who knows you better than anyone else possibly could, because they are you. But we live in a world that teaches us to ignore that voice. We're told to follow the rules, do what's expected, think with our heads, don't trust feelings, listen to experts, copy what successful people do. And some of that advice is good. But what if we've got the balance all wrong? What if that inner voice should be the starting point and everything else should be the second opinion? What if your gut instinct about people is more reliable than their resume? What if your feeling about whether a job is right for you matters more than the salary? What if your sense of what you need right now is more important than what you think you should need? I'm not saying ignore reality or be reckless. I'm saying maybe that voice is part of reality. Maybe it's the part that sees things your thinking brain misses. The more I've trusted it, the better my life has gotten. Not perfect, but better. More mine. More honest. More alive. And here's the cool thing. The more you listen to your own voice, the better you get at hearing when other people are being real too. You can tell when someone's being themselves and when they're just acting. You can sense when someone needs help even if they don't ask for it. You can feel the difference between someone who's truly happy and someone who's just pretending to be. It's like the world becomes more real when you become more real. That joint didn't give me a new voice. It just turned down the volume on all the voices that weren't mine so I could finally hear the one that was. And now I know every conversation worth having is really a conversation with the truest part of yourself. Whether you're talking to a friend, making a decision, facing a problem, or figuring out what you want from life, the most important voice in that conversation is the one that's been with you since you were 8 years old, dreaming of who you might become. The voice that still believes it's possible. The voice that's been waiting so patiently for you to remember how to listen.
Every mind is a joint session. I used to think people who talked to their weed were just high idiots. Now I know they were having the most honest conversations of their lives. Not with the plant, with themselves. The question was never whether the joint talked to me. The question is, what parts of yourself have you been too busy to hear? Every breakthrough you've ever had, every moment you just knew what to do, every time your gut was right, that was this same voice. You've been having these conversations your whole life. You just didn't know you were listening. So the next time you need to make a big decision, or you're stuck on a problem, or you just want to know what you really want, try getting quiet enough to hear what you already know. The conversation is always there. The wisdom is always available. You just have to create the space for it to be heard. Here's the question that only makes sense now that you've taken this journey with me. If you could have one completely honest conversation with yourself right now, what would you ask? If you're ready to keep exploring what it means to really listen to yourself, hit subscribe. We're just getting started on conversations that change everything. Remember, every mind is a joint session. The question is, who's invited to speak?